So hello again and good afternoon from San Antonio, Texas. Thank you all for joining us today and welcome to today's webinar, Webrecorder Tools and More. I'm Courtney Muma, pronouns she, her, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Texas Digital Library. So first, we're going to do a little housekeeping. As always, please keep your microphones muted if you aren't speaking. But again, we love to see your faces if you want to show them throughout. We hope that you'll use the chat box to say hello, let us know you're here, make your comments, and share resources throughout the presentation today. It's also where we'll share links with you related to some of the information. And if you have a question, you can also please type it into the chat and we'll have time for those at the end of the presentation today. Live captioning has been enabled and you can view that live captioning by clicking on the closed caption button on your Zoom toolbar. Texas Digital Library is dedicated to providing an experience for everyone that is free from all forms of harassment and inclusive of all people. We ask that everyone here today be considerate and respectful in speech and action, attempt collaboration before conflict, refrain from demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior or speech, and be mindful of your environment and of your fellow participants. We will publish slides and notes as well as this recording and share them with all of you in attendance today. And finally, Texas Digital Library is very grateful to our members, many of whom are here today, who put your trust in TDL to provide essential library infrastructure and services like digital preservation, digital repository hosting, tools for managing electronic theses and dissertations and research data, support for open educational resources, and metadata aggregation in the DPLA. We invite any institution interested in becoming part of our consortium to reach out to us. We need your energy and your expertise to continue growing the digital library community in this region and invite you to connect with our amazing, fun, and brilliant community of librarians and archivists, some of whom you see smiling on this slide. So just a little background, the Web Archiving Texas Interest Group was formed after the Web Archiving Texas meeting at Baylor University in 2019. The purpose of the group is to build a community around web archiving in Texas, bringing people together to share their skills and resources to accomplish shared goals, and also amplify our work that impacts the national and the international web archiving community. One of their most significant impacts so far has been to support TDL's creation of the Archive It Consortial Discount, wherein members of TDL using that service receive 10% off the regular rates. The Web Archiving Texas Interest Group has a listserv at tdlwatsig@utlist.utexas.edu and quarterly meetings, and anyone is welcome to join the group, whether you're working at TDL member institution or not. So request to join the list if you like, and the meetings and group by emailing support@tdl.org. And now, a little about the Webrecorder project. The Webrecorder project builds tools to specialize in a user-driven form of web archiving, where the user is able to direct the archiving process through their browser. They work to build quality open source tools, enabling web archiving for all, we like that at TDL, to allow anyone with a browser to create their own web archives and to accurately replay them at a later time. You'll be asked to share a link to a site you'd like to capture in chat later as we do some of the actual hands-on work that Ilya will demonstrate. So on with the show. TDL's Web Archiving Texas Interest Group welcomes Ilya Kramer and Lorena Ramirez Lopez of Webrecorder to demonstrate some of their tools.
Thank you, Courtney. I love that intro. That was such a great, concise information and such a great setup. I'm going to share my screen. You'll see a bit of toggling between me and Ilya. Virtual presentations are always hard. Live demos are a presenter's best moment. So bear with us with any technical difficulties, but to get moving, Webrecorder, Web Archiving for All. What we have planned today is basic introductions of who we are and what we hope to do during this workshop. Some web archiving basics. I understand that there was a previous presentation beforehand. So if there's any other questions, we're more than happy to answer them. And we'll go over some basics just so we're all on the same page. And then we're going to do a bunch of demos. We will have a small break so we can all digest what we just seen and troubleshoot any technical issues you might have. So with that being said, I will, Courtney summed it up perfectly of who we are. We're an open source, we're a project that focuses on open source tools. We do consulting, we do workshops and custom software development, and we do projects. If you are doing web archiving and would like to collaborate with us, you can just shoot us an email. We're always looking to expand and help. So what is web archiving? This is where we're going to go over the terminology and the basics. So by definition, web archiving is the process of collecting portions of the World Wide Web, preserving the collections in an archival format, and then serving the archives for access and use. And this definition is agreed upon the field, and it's stated in the International Internet Preservation Consortium, web archiving community we should all be involved with. And as we web archive, there is traditional web crawling. So this traditional web crawling is when a web crawler or a spider or a bot goes out into the internet, goes to your web page and indexes and grabs as many pages and content as it can. The most common web crawler is called Heritrix. So what Webrecorder the project does with the tools is browser-based web archiving. So the browser, your browser, so your Chrome, is the tool that creates your web archive. And it's user-driven. It can be user-driven because we have multiple tools. The tools that we're going to first demo and have you delve in is a user-driven tool, and you choose what to archive and what not to archive. So you interact with it. You interact with the website, your page, what you want archived will be archived if you click on it and interact with it. It is a mostly manual process because of how the first tool we have, archive web page, is, but it is partially automated for certain user behaviors. And by that, I think we all recognize the infinite scroll. That's a user behavior that we can replicate. And what we focus on is quality versus quantity. There's no reason why we need 10 copies of our login page with no content on it. And so when we create these collections, these web archives, we have a standardized format that we all agreed upon, which is called the WARP, Web Archive, literally called the Web Archive. And so this is a bunch of HTTP requests, and thankfully the IIPC has shared the specifications. And while we agree on this format, computers, if you ever downloaded a work file, your computers will not know what to do with it because it's not a file that Macs or PCs will understand how to open, which is why we need these tools. And the specification does have a lot of limitations and gaps, which is why part of what Webrecorder is doing, we have a research project that will focus on the gaps and limitations from the work file. And it's called Web Archive Collection ZIP, pronounced Waxy in its acronym form. So I'll let Ilya speak more about the Waxy file, and I'll start. Oh, Courtney, thanks. You sent the specifications. So Courtney and I will be sharing links.
Yeah, thanks, Lorena. Thanks for that intro. Yeah, great to be here. Yeah, we want to just very briefly before we get to the tools, talk about some of our latest work, which is working on this new format. So this is sort of our what we're currently working on and sort of why we're doing this. So why are we creating a new web archiving spec when the work spec already exists? It's an ISO standard. Yeah, and so there's actually yes, that's the link to the so I think we have both the link to the work spec and the link to the Waxy spec. So when you have more time, you could look over both. Yeah, so why are we doing this? And there's a few reasons. And the work format itself captures the raw data, but that's essentially not enough to have kind of a web archive that's really usable to humans. And with the Waxy spec, we're trying to add a whole bunch of other things. And I think we have them. Yeah, so if we move on to the next slide. Yeah, and yeah, so with the Waxy format, the idea is that it's essentially a zip format that we essentially package up the work data along with a bunch of other stuff that we typically want to have with web archives. And this includes an index of all the URLs, which is necessary for loading pages and URLs quickly from the work file. Also a list of entry pages, pages to start browsing from. Also a full text search index or full text search data, which is often extremely useful for working with web archives, in addition to technical metadata and potentially descriptive metadata about who created the web archive and so forth. And so all of that data is typically not in the work file, and there's not really a standardized way to package all of that up and share it with others, for example. And so with this new format that we're working on, we are trying to standardize that. And so, yeah, this is kind of a brief overview. So we're putting all this data into a zip file. We're also following the frictionless data package spec. We're kind of extending off of that, which just provides us with some basic structure for the format. And yeah, the idea is that this would allow us to package up web archives and share them with others, as we'll demo later with the tools. And this is kind of the format that we're working on that will make this possible. And yeah, so here we've got some current features as well as some potential features in the future, including potentially support for screenshots of key pages, potentially encrypted Waxy files, something that we'll be exploring, proof of authenticity as something that has been coming up a lot, having a way to be able to verify Waxy files, or if you create a web archive and give it to someone, having a way that you can then verify that it was created by them. Obviously, a very broad topic that can be, yeah, so we're just starting to explore that. And then fast access to multiple Waxys. If you have essentially a whole collection of them, loading them all together to have a growing collection, and then also including crawl or capture logs if the Waxys are created from a crawl. Yeah, and so this is part of a grant that we have. Recently received this grant from the Falcon Foundation, and this grant kind of covers our work on the Waxy spec, as well as, so we'll be exploring sort of what are the use cases for Waxy. We already know a few of them, where we're trying to kind of gather even more use cases, and also potential threats and anti-use cases in a way. So, you know, more generally, what happens if people are able to create web archives in the browser, as we'll show, is now possible with some of these tools. We're trying to do some UX research and design around threat modeling, sort of what are the risks, especially around being able to archive social media and potentially share that, and how to deal with that. So that's all part of our current research efforts. And then finally, we'll be integrating this research into our existing tools. Yeah, so this is kind of an overview of what will be of our ongoing work and research. And we can also share links for how you can get involved with if you have use cases or would like to participate in the UX research after today's workshop and are interested in learning more. We'll share links about that later. Yeah, and so a brief mention of why web archiving is hard, which a lot of you who have already done web archiving already know some of this. And the main reason, of course, is that the web is not made of static documents, and we know that the web is dynamic, but dynamic in what ways, and sort of where does that dynamism happen? Is it on the page itself or on the server? And that's where it can get really complicated. And the overall encapsulation complexity of a page is something that a term that we've created to describe this isn't entirely apparent. Yeah, we've got a blog post kind of talking about this in more detail. But the short answer is JavaScript and also web servers make web archiving hard. And our tools are trying to address this in some ways, but it still remains a hard problem. Yeah, so kind of how we'd like to think about sort of where we're focusing on is our tools focus on the capture and the replay. So we have a tool called Archive Webpage that's on the archive web pages is sort of provides the capture functionality, and we have a replay web page which provides the replay functionality. And then of course there's this where does your data go in the storage, and I'm a big fan of this animation that Lorena found. And the answer is, well, there's various options. So and we'll talk about that later, and our goal is to support many of them, but providing storage at this point hasn't been our focus. We're focusing on the tools to create to capture and replay. Yeah, so I think we'll demo our first tool next, Archive Webpage. And Archive Webpage is a browser extension. And yeah, so what it is it essentially allows you to use your browser as an archiving capture tool, and allows you to interactively archive exactly what you browse. And it's available on the Chrome Web Store, so it works with any Chrome or Chromium-based browser. Yeah, essentially it allows anyone using it to archive as they're browsing. It's entirely user-driven, but there is some automation as I'll show in a second. Yeah, so I'll do a quick demo of Archive Webpage, and then you'll all have a chance to try it out for a few minutes if you'd like. So I'll at this point, I think I'll switch to sharing my screen. And then I will, so I will screen. Yeah, so Archive Webpage can be installed simply by going to archiveweb.page. So try to make it as simple as possible to remember. And if you don't have the extension installed already, you would see a page like this where there's a link to install the extension from the Chrome Web Store. If you're not using Chrome or a Chrome-based browser like Edge or Brave, we also have a desktop app that can be downloaded. So I'm using a new browser profile, so I'll just go ahead and go to the Chrome Web Store. And from here, I can click on Add to Chrome and add it. And then the extension will appear in the top right, where extensions are generally added these days. And then I can also pin it. And it will appear in the browser extensions list over here. Yeah, and then I can, so what I can do is go to a page. So maybe I'll start with, actually I already have it installed. And I'll go, so I'll start, for example, with Twitter. And if there are additional URL suggestions, I can try them later as well. And so for example, I'm on the Twitter site for the text digital library, and what I can do is I can click on the extension here. I can click on create new archive. So I'll just and click on start, and then what it will do is it will reload the page and immediately start capturing everything that's being loaded. So in this case, we can already see that that it's already captured. It's loaded 21 megabytes and stored 10. And the reason for the discrepancy is that if there are any duplicates, they're only stored once. So this size will generally be larger. And I can, for example, as I'm sort of moving around and clicking, more things will be captured. And let's see what I do next. So I can click on that tdl.org link, and this will open in a new tab. And this tab is now also recording, and we can see how much it's captured in this tab. And I can, from here, choose which pages I would like to go to. So I can, for example, click on the About page. So again, this is currently entirely user-driven. So the user is able to curate which pages they would like to archive. The extension does not yet have automated crawling. That's something that we're looking at in the future, but we will show it a different tool for automated crawling. So for example, I click on this page and it's sort of, this essentially allows the user to kind of have a very specific curated path that they're archiving. So now I can, without stopping, I can click on Browse Archive here, and it'll show me the pages that have been archived thus far. And it is sort of, I started with the Twitter URL, and so now I'm viewing the replay also inside the browser, inside the extension. But let's say I want to click on something that on a tweet here, so that obviously won't work because I didn't yet archive that tweet. I can of course click on the pages that I did archive. I can also, but let's say I do want to archive the entire Twitter feed for TDL. What I can do is I can then, we do have the AutoPilot feature, which will then, what it will start doing is it will start simulating user interactions. And so it'll start scrolling and clicking on each tweet. And this is sort of a custom pre-scripted behavior that we have. And we have them for Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook currently. It's possible to add them for other sites as well. These have kind of been the most requested sites that we've had for automated behaviors. Yeah, so if I basically leave this running, it will kind of keep going. The idea is that it's designed to move slowly, so that it's sort of simulating the user. Of course, that also allows it to kind of avoid any kind of rate limits on Twitter. So I think in the interest of time, I will pause this, but before I do that, it also kind of keeps track of some of the metadata, so it can keep track of tweets, images, and videos that it has loaded, as well as the size and the number of URLs. Currently, this metadata is just stored in the extension, but it could be exported as part of the metadata in the Waxy format in the future. So I'll go ahead and pause, and then I can go back.
So before we start reviewing the archive, we have two good questions
Sure.
that are related. So one of the questions is there a benefit to doing this outside of the Twitter archive option?
I believe the Twitter, I believe the Twitter archive is the option that allows users to download their own Twitter feeds in some form. I haven't used it myself. I think that basically gives you a static kind of data dump of your own data, whereas this allows you to archive any account, this should also work for hashtags as well. So I could, for example, pick a hashtag and archive that. The idea is that this should have the same view that you have in Twitter, whereas I think when you download data from Twitter, they sort of give it to you in a different format. Although I think that might have improved over the years. I think last time I checked it, it was sort of a static HTML file, perhaps, whereas this ideally all the videos and kind of photos should work in this. Yeah, so the idea is that this would be a high fidelity archive of exactly what you're seeing on Twitter.
I also think that if you're generating or creating a collection, Twitter might be just one digital asset that you have within the collection, so you can keep everything within the work, or Waxy file. So everything within the web archive. If it's just Twitter, it will just be only Twitter, and then you'll just have different files, and you would have to kind of combine them and access them and share them on a different platform, because there'll be different files rather than having the web archive all in one package. So that's one benefit.
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
And since we're on Twitter, do we need to be logged into a social media platform for the AutoPilot feature to work properly?
So that's also a great question. For Twitter, the answer is no. But I think for Instagram and Facebook, they've really kind of restricted what can be done when you're not logged in. So for those, I think yes, because otherwise you with Instagram, you pretty much it'll stop. It'll basically stop you from scrolling past the first page and want you to log in. And I think Facebook shows a different view. That's, I think, sort of an older UI that's also fairly restricted if you're not logged in. And our recommendation around that is to have a dedicated profile specifically for archiving. So that's definitely kind of in some ways a risk as well. And part of our research is going to be kind of exploring that. What does it mean to archive things when you're logged in? Here I went back into the replay view, and from here you can see that sort of it has it's loading this page as Webrecorder, so it has the sort of the view is exactly as it is for when you're logged in as Webrecorder, which can be good and bad. If you're archiving something that's private, you probably want to be careful, obviously not to share it publicly. If it's not supposed to be public. On the other hand, you might want to archive public content on Instagram and Facebook, but you still need a profile for that. And that's where having a dedicated profile would probably be the best option. So yeah, there's definitely a few considerations around that, and hopefully at some point we'll have publish a blog post or kind of an explanation of some of these recommendations. And so if that's it for questions for now, I can move on. Yeah, so basically I basically stopped archiving and went back to the, so I basically clicked on stop and then clicked on browse archive. And so, or actually browse that specific page. And from here, we again have the page list of all of the pages that were created during this archiving session. And from here, so we have the sidebar. I can actually, there should be some kind of basic full text search that's automatically grabbed from the pages as they're being captured. So for example, if it's fairly simple, and at this size, sort of with a small number of pages, it works fairly well. But it does kind of let you search for terms in the text. And yeah, so that, and yeah, that's created as part of the archive and will be exported when we create the Waxy file. And I guess if I go back to Twitter, to this initial, we should be able to scroll down, and I think the videos should also be getting archived. They often change the format, so, but I think this video, for example, did get captured, and I should be able to click on all of the tweets that have been archived thus far. Yeah, so I think again it sort of goes as far as the capture process went. I'm not sure if we got here. Yeah, I guess we did. Yeah, so and you can also sort of instantly replay as you're archiving, and kind of pause the autopilot and then continue it again if you don't leave the page. And yeah, so there's lots of ways to kind of stop and then kind of continue archiving again. And so all of this data has been added to the demo txdl collection. From here, we also have the option to, let's say if I don't want a particular page, it is possible to delete individual pages from here. So for example, say I don't want this hashtag, kind of, so I can just click delete. And then here I can also select which pages I would like to download. And I can, by default, download all the pages. We also have a few options available for download. We have the Waxy format, which we've been talking about. We also have regular work 1.1, as well as work 1.0. These are the two standards that exist for work, and so we make the downloads available for in those formats as well. Of course, we recommend using the Waxy format, especially for the next stage, which is all will make the replay part much simpler. So I've just clicked here and downloaded the Waxy file.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Before we move on to the next tool, which is going to be replay web page, because once you download your Waxy or work file, you can upload it to replay web page. I want to preface to the audience that being able to search through a web archive and also to deleting a single page is not normal features for web archiving tools.
Yes, yes, that is true.
Very easy, and it's something that we're very used to because of how websites work nowadays. It is not an easy feature to do for tools. So, but it is something that we do offer. And I do want to preface that it is there and it is very nice to have, because we don't realize how often we need to delete, rename, or move things around. So 2 questions still regarding how to archive with social media. So we have, with the AutoPilot, do you have to tell it when to stop, or will it keep auto scrolling through the entire feed?
Yes, so if you don't stop it, it will keep auto scrolling through the entire feed. That's exactly right. Yeah, so here I can essentially, once I started, yes, let's say, let me start again, and then I click on, so yeah, I can either pause AutoPilot, and then it'll pause, or I can stop archiving altogether. But if I don't do that, if I just kind of let it run, it'll keep going through the whole feed, which may be useful. Usually, I think we've had a lot of interest in just being able to archive an entire feed. Yeah.
It also depends on like how big the feed is. We've had users communicate with each other on the best ways, because some will leave their auto feed going and it works, but then other users will have files that reach big levels of data. So not just 1 gigabyte or 2 gigabytes, like they'll reach really high amounts of data. And that's where we're still figuring out how best to control all that. So you can, I personally, as a user, I like breaking it into chunks. One, just because I don't have to wait for it to render forever, because computers will always take forever when they download, no matter what. So doing it by chunks is nice, but you can do the auto, you can just let it do its thing, but if it gets really big, it will get unwieldy, because no matter what tool you're using, your computer is going to be, this is a lot of data that I'm handling right now.
Right, and all of this is being stored in the browser. So this is, although, yeah, and we've definitely had users who have sort of successfully archived several gigabytes. So for example, Instagram, and yeah, so it's definitely it's definitely possible. But yeah, you might. And the other thing is that there's not really a good way to start somewhere in the middle. Unfortunately, with social media, you sort of kind of have to start at the top. I guess you could probably do a search in Twitter for a specific date range, and try to archive those tweets. But yeah, it does make it sort of difficult to archive things that aren't at the top of the feed, basically. Are there any additional questions?
There is one about privacy, but I think it's a really good question to go over when we talk about sharing our archives. So with that being said, I see that question. We will get to it, and I think it will work very well with the topic on sharing archives. So we just went over capture, and we'll still have a hands-on moment to capture more, and so we can answer more questions. But now that we did capture, how do we replay it? So this is where we start using replay web page. So yes. We saw that Ilya downloaded his Waxy. Do you mind doing that one more time and then
showing
what you do with that?
Yes,
Waxy?
absolutely. Yes. So I'll download this Waxy file. So from the collection page, I can click on here on the, and it'll just download it with the extension WACZ. And oh, I think it's now bigger because I just ran another, so I have two Waxy file with one slightly bigger than the other, but that's okay. And then yeah, so that gets the data out of the extension and using the in the Waxy format that we have. And then the next tool that we want to show is called replay web page. And actually, I guess we can. Maybe I'll just quickly show the slide for that. Yeah, so replay web page is sort of the counter I guess the counterpart to Archive web page using the same technology, but it's basically a website that a static website that can be used to load Waxy files as well as Works. It's of course also backwards compatible with Work, and this provides for a standalone way to load web archives using the browser itself. And yeah, so the idea is that it's loading directly in the browser. There's no server involved, which I think is very sort of a key point that makes it kind of different than sort of the traditional Wayback Machine approach, where there's sort of a server that's running a Wayback Machine, and that server has to be maintained. Whereas a replay web page allows for loading and viewing web archives the way that you would load and view videos or PDFs directly in the browser. And it's also available as a standalone desktop app. Oh yeah, and there's also there's actually Flash support as well in using the Flash emulator in the desktop app. Yeah, so I'll quickly show replay web page next. And for that, I can just go to replayweb.page. And so this shows all of the previous Waxy files that I've loaded. So I've quite a lot that I've been testing. Maybe I'll switch to my blank browser profile here, and then I will simply just choose a file, and from my downloads folder, I can open the Waxy file. Oh, maybe, well, that's disappointing. Let's hope that this one, maybe I interrupted that download or something. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so this shows, this is sort of the same view as we saw in the extension. It's using kind of the same JavaScript library underneath, but this is now running on a separate, essentially loaded in a separate domain, and this is pointing to a file. So I can't share this because it's just loading this from my desktop. But if I were to upload the Waxy file onto any kind of cloud storage or anything that's publicly accessible, then I could just share the link to replayweb.page, and anyone can load it. I can also kind of similar idea here. Same UI. I can click around the pages that I have previously archived, including the Twitter feed. And I can also, yeah, and so the idea with this is that this is loaded entirely in the browser. There's no server, there's no Wayback Machine powering this, and this might be useful for sort of loading smaller web archives and kind of integrating with other systems. And one example that I also want to show is that it's possible to embed web archives into other sites using this tool. And one example of that that I'll show very quickly is this. So this is using Glitch, where this is also a replay web page, and it has, for example, an archive of a single tweet, and we have an archive of a YouTube video, all embedded kind of as iframes inside the page. And again, a similar idea. So I could do that with the Waxy file that I just created, and we'll show a tool that we created in Glitch that allows you to do that as well later on. But I think now we can move on to, yeah, we should let all of you, if you'd like, take some time to try out the extension and replay web page, and we can answer some questions.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take, oh, do you want to take over and share your screen?
No,
or
sure. Actually, yeah. I'll pass it on to Lorena to share a screen.
Okay, so I'll put a little timer on my phone for 5 minutes. We still have plenty of time for more questions, and we still have one more tool that we're not gonna delve into and have everyone try out because it's a little bit more technical and requires an installation of Docker. But we are gonna show that if you get tired of doing things manually, that there is an automatic way. We do have
Yes, we'll and
some
oh,
minutes.
Lorena, could you go one slide up?
Oh yeah.
On is that's the second phase, is the depth. Yes,
Oh.
yeah, here we go.
I got too eager.
Yes, that's next. Yeah, so you could all and we could also share our screen and show how to do this. But yeah, essentially if you go to archive web that page, and then there'll be a link to the Chrome Web Store from where you can download the extension and add it. And then you can try if there are certain pages that you would like to archive. Some of you have submitted URLs, which is really great. You can try the extension out on those pages. For the AutoPilot to work, we recommend using Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. On other pages, it'll just basically scroll to the end of the page currently.
It's a little underwhelming when you do the autopilot on a really short website.
Yes, it's not yet a crawling tool. It's only automating in a single page.
So I'm just going to read out there's 3 questions on our queue that I'm just going to read out loud so you have them in your mind, because this time is for you all to try using the tool and get stuck, and then we're here to help. So one question that works really well with the sharing archives: any thoughts on how to manage privacy issues when capturing social media, especially user comments? Which is a great question, and it's actually part of, I think it relates a lot to the research that we're currently doing now.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
we might get to you later.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think currently the answer is that it's we don't yet have an answer. I think it's something that we're exploring, sort of how at least to communicate that to users, sort of what's being archived. Currently, the AutoPilot is expanding comments just the first set, and then I think it waits a certain number of seconds and expands as many comments as it can in that span of time. One idea that has been suggested is perhaps some sort of redaction. Well, yeah. So one option is just not to expand the comments at all. So that's maybe the simplest approach. Another approach is to explore some sort of redaction where maybe the comment is there, but the user identifying information is somehow redacted. That's also kind of a fairly challenging idea because of how it's not just a static website. It's the comments are dynamically generated from some JavaScript that's loaded on the page. Yeah, at some point we might explore that, or sort of what could be done with that. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and we're hoping to kind of explore this in a variety of ways as part of this research grant.
Is there a size limit to the work that the Waxy can handle? One of the issues with many early adopters to Archivit, for example, is they created everything in one collection. So for us at TSLAC, all of Texas state government is crawled 2 times a year as one gigantic work, which is roughly 100 of gigabytes, like hundreds of gigabytes.
As far as size limit, believe that there is currently a size limit to the extension itself. I think the extension can only export Waxy files up to 4 gigabytes, and that's kind of due to the zip library that we're using. But that's the limit of the extension. The format itself can support any sort of work files of any size. We also have other tools for. We have a Python command line tool that can be used to package up work files and create a Waxy file out of them. So if you have existing work files, it'll basically run through them and put them into a Waxy file, as well as the index. So if it's a fairly large, it might take a little bit of time to create that Waxy, but then once it's created, the idea is that you could put it on a web server and have Replay web page access it. We're also exploring ways to have multiple Waxy files kind of combined together to form a collection. That's also part of our current research grant, such that, for example, each crawl might produce a Waxy file of its own, and then basically the viewer can access multiple Waxy files at once, and that might also be an interesting approach, especially since like one Waxy file could correspond to we can call it web archive crawl zip, and then it has all the metadata for a single crawl in it. So we're also exploring kind of different approaches to that, and hopefully that will be part of the spec, or various recommendations for how to approach this.
All right.
So
hopefully people have had time to play around and explore the interface, try to capture a website they had in mind. I just want to expand on one of the questions that for the auto feature grabs the embedded media on the page. So just to re-say what I had written in the chat, the auto feature will replicate some behaviors. So it will do this like the scrolling and clicking for you. So it works well with Twitter because it has that scroll and will capture embedded media, and the tweet itself with Instagram will go through those scrolls and go grab photos. With regular web pages, if the page itself has an infinity scroll with like posts, it will go through that, but it won't go through, say if there's a menu bar, it won't click through those menu bars. That's not the feature that gets replicated when we use the AutoPilot.
right, and a lot of that is because it sort of requires creating custom behaviors for each page essentially. So all of this is so for anyone that might be interested, we actually have I'll just share this GitHub repo here that essentially contains all of the behaviors that are supported automatically, and so we actually test them every day. So we actually have them. We have automated tests that, for example, test archiving Facebook, Twitter, Instagram daily on a very short profile. Sometimes it breaks sort of randomly, so it's a very challenging area. We also have automatically playing videos and stuff like that, and this behavioral library can be expanded, but that's currently what it supports.
Yeah, for YouTube videos and images embedded into a regular web page, YouTube, like unfortunately, in my experience, videos aren't embedded the same way. So for the AutoPilot feature, correct me if I'm wrong, Leah, won't recognize that there's a video there if it's on a web page.
It should play. It tries to put on. In general, I think it should capture YouTube and Vimeo at least. We are testing those. Other types of videos, it sort of depends on what kind of player it uses. If it's some sort of custom player, it might not detect it. It tries to detect kind of regular HTML-based video. And then on Twitter, I think it detects. I believe on Twitter it detects sort of default Twitter videos, but maybe not other types of custom players. Yeah, there's so many variations on that. So it's not 100%, but in general, it should be working for sort of the common use cases, I'd say. And yeah, if there's something that doesn't work, we'll hope to address it in the future.
Yeah, the YouTube and Vimeo, they have their own structure so that's something that we can try to replicate, but for a YouTube being embedded onto a web page, that's all custom depending on the website. So the auto feature pilot is looking for specific, patterns and codes. So that's why it gets a little bit complicated with just a web page by itself. But if you have an example, that is something that can be customized and looked into. We just need examples. Okay. There's one more question that's really pertinent to storage and sharing. So I want to encourage folks to download their Waxy files, because we're going to take another. So we took 5 minutes to play around, and if 5 minutes wasn't enough, that's okay. Sorry, Courtney, we're gonna just take a quick 5-minute break, but I'm gonna be here to help anyone. So we'll, at exactly will be a 4-minute break, so we can come back at the hour. So for New York time, it's 1. For Texas, that would be what time is that, Courtney?
It's at noon. Sorry. I couldn't find my unmute.
Okay.
So we'll come back at noon. So I'm checking the chats. If anyone went off the rails with, using archive webpage, we are here. So we can take this time as well to fix anything. Because the next section is just us, Ilya showing browser tricks crawler, which is the more technical automated one, which is very nice because after all the clicking we did, it's a nice other option we have. But we're not going to take that opportunity to have everyone try it because it is a little bit technical. So that might be another workshop we can try to arrange if people really like it. And we're going to talk about how we're going to share web archives. Yes, when we're using archive web page, we need a kick through. So browser-based crawling is my interaction with my browser. So exactly like if I just had the browser open, it doesn't have all those the web pages, the menus, those photos being shown or even accessed, because as we interact with a website, we're sending a HTTP request. So when we do this click, it's like, show me more photos. I want to see more cats. I want to see more dogs. So each of those are requests. So in order for us to capture, we need to make that request. And so with archive web page, this is a manual capture. And we realized very quickly that sometimes websites look very simple and minimalistic, and instead they have like 100 of pages and we're clicking for infinity. So this is where browser tricks crawler and more automated tools come in handy. Yeah, we still have time. And yes, so that error happens, and that's okay. So you can try refreshing, and this is where when Ilya had mentioned earlier about a profile, we meant a Google profile. Since Archive web page uses Google, Google gives you this opportunity, the option of creating multiple profiles. So instead of using the profile that you would check your Gmail on, or it's related to work, creating a separate profile that's specifically just for web archiving, because then that also separates personal searches and algorithms that Google likes to show you to share and other things. So if you try refreshing or trying opening another window in Chrome or another tab and opening that page again. So Google profile, yeah. Yeah, and also social media accounts for archiving. That's also really important, especially if we're going to be talking about privacy. Because of course, social media wants to know everything about ourselves. So we're going to try to archive. We want to first also protect ourselves as well as the content.
Yeah, one other thing to mention, which I think we should probably add to the docs, is that if you have other extensions installed, I think due to the, I think this is just in the last several versions of Chrome. I think they basically, I think Archive web page sometimes doesn't work if you have other extensions installed. So yeah, as Lorena mentioned, having a new browser profile with just Archive web page can often solve that problem, so that you don't have to uninstall your other extensions. Yeah, so I think we also wanted to talk about BrowserTricks crawler, but maybe I can just very briefly mention what it is. I don't think we really have time to quite talk about it a whole lot, but basically this is our sort of automated crawling tool. Right now there isn't yet a UI for it, but it is basically sort of to answer the question of what happens if you want to archive things at slightly larger scale, but still using the browser. Basically, yeah, this is a Docker-based tool that can run on a command line, and it can crawl an entire site. That there's sort of a whole bunch of settings around crawl configuration, and basically when it's running, yeah, it can essentially also run the same behavior. So it could scroll through feeds. It can essentially automate the browser in much the same way, but it yeah, and so the idea is that it kind of provides for higher fidelity, sort of higher scale crawling at the same fidelity. The trade-offs currently are that it's not interactive. Oh, actually, I do have, so maybe I'll just share my screen for one quick second so I can show you what it looks like when it's running. So yeah, so basically this is kind of we're still kind of working on these features, but basically what it does is I have it running with 3 browsers automated, and so it's crawling the TDL site, and you can see it's sort of loading the pages one at a time. So it sort of provides, the idea is that as a browser-based crawling tool, it can provide sort of immediate feedback on kind of what is being crawled, which we think is very exciting. Sort of, again, going back to the kind of traditional crawling tools like Heritrix don't have a way to show something like this because they're not using a browser, but this can actually show you sort of what exactly it's being crawled. And right now I think it's, yeah, so this is kind of, and I also have a bunch of stuff running on the command line, which isn't as exciting. So this is probably the most exciting thing to show with BrowserTricks crawler, but we're working on additional ways to make it more, yeah, to build a UI for it in the future, and perhaps that will be a future workshop. So I'll stop sharing here. Another thing that actually, we also wanted to talk about sharing.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Okay. Do you want to take? Okay, I'll pass it back to Lorraine. Okay.
Okay, so a really good question that had popped up earlier, which talks about, I know running an instance of Open Wayback has been a big hurdle for us to providing replay capability to web archives at FSU. This seems like a huge advance in that area. Has there been any work around into integrating this in digital/institutional repositories, example, Islandora, etc.? Yeah. Sonido.
Yeah, so one thing that we wanted to, so we very briefly wanted to talk about some of the sharing options that we've explored. One is uploading web archives to Glitch. And so I don't think we quite have a time to do an interactive demo. Basically, we have this web archive starter, which we'll share in the yeah, we'll share a link to that in a second. And yes, there it is. And so you can all basically try this out. Glitch is a platform for essentially kind of, I guess how to use, but you can basically sort of make copies of web applications in Glitch and have them be hosted and modify them. This is kind of a pre-made template that allows you to upload work and Waxy files. As you upload them, it'll automatically update this website that will provide a view similar to the one that I shared before with embedded YouTube and Twitter videos. So this is kind of a quick template for making these on the fly, basically. So if you have Waxy files that you want to share with others, you can use this as a quick starter template, basically.
So Glitch is for sharing and access. As a digital repository, I wouldn't recommend it as something for forever, because it is still another server that if you are an institution, organization, or university, you will want to have more control over your own servers. But for the purposes of access and sharing your web archives, in case you don't have a very tight-knit rapport with your IT or development team, this is a nice, simpler option in order to share your web archives. And we do have a video on how we use it. I think I need to make another video up with the updated, because Ilya had simplified the process like tenfold, where it's only like the drag and drop feature now. Before it was going into the HTML code like LiveJournal or like MySpace, and you'd be like changing color. Now it's a drag and drop. It's crazy how simple it is now, but it's an option if in case you want to tap into our 2000s era.
Yes, yeah. So Glitch is more like a fun, quick sharing. Yeah, it's definitely not a digital repository, but this is just sort of one example of what you could do with Waxy files to host them quickly. And then another tool that we want to share is the Archipelago digital repository, which I believe just had their 1.0 release, and that is being developed out of the Metro New York Library Council, along with various other partners that they have. It's a great open source repository. We've been working with them on integration of the replay web page system into this repository, and it can actually take a second yeah, I can actually maybe share my screen for a second and show
When we talk about like the digital repositories, this is where we saw like a really great option. I pass you the baton, but it's for their developers and archivists thinking about the problems and questions that we have been having. So they have everything of how to integrate web archives, like how we want to access archives in a digital platform.
Yes, exactly. And yeah. So just very quickly, so this is sort of our special instance that Metro has been hosting for us, that we've been kind of using for other workshops. And what it basically provides is a way to integrate web archives with other digital objects in a unified repository. So for example, there's some examples of kind of other types of objects, but there's also web archives that can be loaded. So for example, here's an archive of our homepage, and here it's using the replay web page viewer embedded and kind of so it's using that same system, but integrated into a full-fledged repository that has sort of all the things that you typically expect in a repository. And Archipelago has a whole bunch of other features that we don't have time to get into, but one of them is definitely integration, and also so for example, there's also integrated full text search. So the full text search data that's in the Waxy files, when we upload it to Archipelago, is extracted and added automatically to the Solar instance that Archipelago is running. And this kind of provides a way to have essentially a unified, so for example, I searched for Webrecorder, and it's probably, yeah, so it's matching these links here, and it can kind of, yeah, essentially provide a unified search that can combine different types of objects. And again, this is still, I think this is actually an older version of Archipelago, not yet the latest release, but yeah, that's basically the idea, is that we could, I think, provide integrated web archives with institutional digital repositories without having to run custom infrastructure such as Open Wayback or even PyWB for institutions that want to have web archives integrated into their existing systems without having to maintain additional infrastructure. This might be a good option. And yeah, so here's another example of a web page loaded with replay web page. And yeah, so this is again sort of a simple example with the Waxy format added to Archipelago. And again, if there's we're definitely interested in working with other repositories and other systems to figure out if it makes sense to integrate these replay web page support into those tools as well. And yeah, I think I will leave it at that, and we can probably move on to questions, or I'll pass it back to Lorena with any closing thoughts.
Yeah, no, this is perfect, because this is exactly the question part where, you know, if someone has a specific example, we can go over more tools, well, the tools that we reviewed in case, you know, there isn't a problem that popped up, or we will also love to hear, you know, your general opinion and feedback. Complaints are always, you know, I love complaining about web archiving. I love it, but it's always, it's like playing a video game that I will never get to the boss level.
I love that. I did see one. Did we get to Kristen's question? Ilya said that you have to start at the top for social media. Go ahead, Lorena.
Oh, I was just going to read it too.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So yeah, you had said that we have to start at the top for social media, correct? I would like to create an archive on my institution's Facebook post related to COVID starting in February 2020. Can I focus on that, or do I have to archive everything starting from today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so I know Twitter allows you to search by date. I think there's a search function. I don't know if Facebook allows that. Maybe. So basically it's if the site doesn't provide a way to start loading from February 2020, then there isn't anything that we as web archivists can do, unfortunately. So it's sort of, yeah, it's, I don't know 100% if that's a no, but maybe Facebook has such a way of doing that without using their API. But if not, then there isn't anything that we can do.
Yeah,
So,
the URL is always where do we start? So that's why sometimes it gets difficult with websites now where they just refresh, even though you're on a different page and it just says the same URL. It gets tricky because the tool is like, I'm here, I did it. And it's like, continue. It doesn't know where to start or where to end.
oh, I see a follow-up question, but we could scroll down to February 20 and do a manual scroll. Yeah, so you could manually, yeah, so you can manually scroll to 2020, but there isn't a way to, and actually, I think I'll have to double check if AutoPilot will pick up from there, if that's what you're asking, if it's possible to have it pick up from the current position on the page. I think maybe not right now, but maybe that might be something that we could add as a way to, if you manually scroll somewhere and have it and point to where you want it to start, maybe there's a way to do that. But right now I think it's sort of to keep it simple, especially with Facebook, because Facebook has, we could probably spend all our time just on Facebook alone because of how complicated it is, unfortunately. I think currently it has to start at the top.
How long is Facebook even gonna last now when Zuckerberg wants to become a metaverse? Whatever. And they also have like 50,000 developers working on, so, and like there's Ilya. As we work on these tools, there's Ilya, and then versus the 50,000 Facebook developers. But Abra, if it's something that you're working on now, that means you have a URL and website in mind. So you can shoot us an email because we'll be able to jump off that example rather than searching the World Wide Web on how to do that. So I'm gonna take this opportunity just to share my screen so you can get our contact information.
Yes.
And can I add too? So two exciting things. One is that at TDL, we really want to start facilitating projects that are interesting and exciting to our members. And in Texas, we know that our members use Content DM, Digital Commons, Archive Space, Islandora, and of course we host DSpace, institutional repositories. There really is an opportunity then for TDL members with our help to kind of facilitate them getting together and making this happen for one of those access systems. I think it's really important to know that their team, Ilya and Lorena, are available for hiring, for doing development and doing projects and working on grants. The other thing I want to say is that TDL has definitely set aside some time and some funding in 2022 to work on a web archiving project. And the people who will help us define that are our Web Archiving Texas interest group. So if you're not in that group yet and you've got great ideas about how we can collaborate on web archiving in Texas, it's a good time to join because we're just now going to start scoping and deciding what we want to do together.
Hey, thank you, Courtney. Yeah, that's exciting to hear. Yeah, we'd definitely love to collaborate with you on helping, support your work and make it easier for you to create web archives.
Thanks.
Are there additional questions? I'm just scrolling through the.
It's definitely okay if you're still digesting.
Yeah,
It was
but
a lot of tools on a field and practice that is still being written about and progress.
yeah, yeah, uh, if you have a chance to try out these tools in the future and run into any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. And yeah,
no, you can finish that thought and I'll read the question.
yeah, that's I was just going to say, yeah, we have many different ways to reach us, including Twitter, email, and also a forum where if you want to kind of share knowledge and issues about archiving, you can look, yeah, basically take a look at our forum and also ask me questions there.
Yeah, we're still expanding and amplifying our forum. So like that's my 2022 year resolution to really hype it up more. So that and our YouTube channel, which I'm just gonna add right here, because for me to change our YouTube channel name, I need 100 subscribers. So I am selfishly soliciting people to subscribe, please. And with that, the question that popped up. So to compare to Internet Archive, these Waxy files would not be discoverable via Google. You need to have them cataloged in a repository, yes?
Yes, so just like, yeah, I think I don't know that Google indexes custom file formats. I guess they might index, well, they probably index PDF and doc and some of the really well sort of well-known formats out there. But yes, if you're just hosting a Waxy file, it will not be picked up as a something that Google understands right now. Yep.
Yeah,
That makes sense. It feels like it's just two different like beasts. Like I'm not trying to compare them like pros and cons. I'm just like, these are two different things happening in the world. But so if you did have now I can't say it, a Waxy file in your repository, I did it. How do you tell the person to open it in that play thingy?
So that can be configured automatically. So
Sorry, Lorena.
Oh no, it's a great question. It's exactly that. It's when you also download a work file, your computer's like, I don't know this. This is a fake file that you gave me.
So how do I tell the user to like, sorry, but Ilya, you're saying that's a.
Oh yeah, so what we're hoping to sort of help support is for repositories to automatically use this. So basically, we have an embedding guide that shows how it could be done for a repository to automatically use our replay web page viewer for the Waxy format. But if users just download it, then they can also go to replayweb.page and load it there. But yeah, and then in order to make it automated, the repository would need to support to essentially understand the format and provide the correct viewer, which we can help with.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you so much, both of you.
I have a quick question, if it's okay. But y'all still ask your questions in chat if you want to, or unmute yourself after I hush myself. What can you highlight for me some of the big differences between the extension and the app that you download?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, we didn't quite get to downloading the app. The idea is that they should work almost the same way. The main difference is that the extension requires a Chrome-based browser. So if you, for example, only use Firefox, then you wouldn't be able to use the extension, but you can still use the app. Also, the extension does have some additional, like occasionally certain sites can't be archived due to some security setting in the browser. Like, for example, it's hard to archive Google sites like Google Docs, for example, because Google has these custom things that they add to their own sites, I guess, that occasionally makes the extension fail. But that's not a problem if you're loading Google Docs in the app. So yeah, mostly things like that. But other than that, the idea is that they should work in pretty much the same way. I think for archive web page, it might be also, yeah. So for example, if you want to do other things in your browser, but want to also keep archiving in the background, then that's easier to do with archive web page running. Yeah, so it's part of it is kind of to address these edge cases, but also that to address those who might prefer a separate app versus an extension.
Thanks.
Oh, that was a really good question. Thank you, Courtney. And the app is, there's a DMG, which is what Mac likes. It would recognize it. So it would be like, okay, I can open this thing. And there's also the EXE, which is for Windows. I will say that most tools are more geared towards Mac because we live in a very Mac world, but we do others.
Actually, yeah, that reminds me. One other point is that yes. So with the app, one thing that you can do is you can have it. I think if you install Replay Web Page, it will automatically be able to open .waxy file, so that then you can double click on the .waxy file and have it open it in the app, which is not possible with an extension or something that's just in the browser. So that's another reason.
So we have about 3 minutes left. If it's all right with you, Ilya and Lorena, I'd like to share my final slide, but y'all still, if you have got more questions, we definitely have time for at least one more question. So pop that into the chat there, or feel free to unmute yourself. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to just say thank you. This was fantastic. I have so many things I want to dig into, and I bet a lot of the folks who attended today feel the same way. This is very exciting, and I hope we can continue communicating and working with y'all. You know, those of you who are dropping off, please stay happy and healthy. And thanks for participating today and sharing your examples and asking questions. And Ilya and Lorena, again, this was awesome. Thank you so much. You don't get paid to do this from us. You did it out of the generosity of your hearts and the belief in your tools. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Courtney, for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you all for having us. Yeah, it was really great.
Especially it's like probably lunchtime for you all, so it's like, I'm ready. Everyone's ready to go to lunch.
Yeah, this was fantastic. I'm just seeing a lot of thanks coming in. So I think the feeling's mutual. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and stop the recording. And we'll be in touch with y'all. Excited to join the forum and keep playing with these tools and seeing how we can maybe work together in the coming years.
Great.
All right, y'all take care. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye.